Good evening, everyone. We're so glad to have everybody here for this very special opportunity to learn about the COVID-19 vaccine and to have an opportunity to ask and get our questions answered about how the vaccine was formulated and how it was tested and how it works and what are the reasons why someone should avail themselves of the vaccine and its efficacy and its safety. In our tradition, Maimonides says that the Holy One created not only an extraordinary universe and world that's filled with amazing opportunities for us to just explore the gifts of the natural world, but God gave us the incredible ability to use our minds and our talents to mix together compounds to formulate medicines that can help to heal human life. And he taught that it was really our duty to use that God-given ability that is given to us to formulate ways to promote as much health and extend life as long as possible. And that admonition that he gave more than 900 years ago rings true in our world today in the advancement of medical science. And we're going to have a chance to really explore what that's all about this evening. First, though, before we begin, I would like to just thank Vice Mayor Robert Weinroth, who is with us this evening. And he has done so much in our community to make a difference in the lives of people in our area and certainly in South Palm Beach County, and wanted to give him the opportunity to share some greetings on behalf of our county government.
Thank you, Rabbi, and I appreciate this opportunity to say hello to everybody here at Bethel. We have gone through quite a bit over the last year. It's hard to believe that just a year ago, the pandemic was something that was going on in Wuhan and in Europe and really hadn't taken hold here in the United States. But in that short year, we are very lucky because we have worked together as a community to deal with the hardships that a lot of our community has dealt with, whether it be putting food on the table, whether it's paying the rent and keeping a roof over our head, or all the other problems that have been caused by this pandemic. And we are really fortunate that the community has pulled together. And we're also fortunate because our county commission has had a strong partnership with our Department of Health. And I know today you're going to have the pleasure of hearing from Dr. Alonso, and she's going to tell you a little bit about what's going on with the state. But we're very fortunate that we have a strong partnership with the Department of Health, with the healthcare district, and we are going to get through this pandemic together. We are vaccinating our residents. We are, the rollout has not been without its problems, but we are moving forward. A lot of our residents are getting vaccinated. Publix is working on it. The healthcare district, the Department of Health is working on it. And many of our residents, including myself, have gotten vaccinated. So I applaud you for having this session today to let people know how this vaccine works and hopefully to convince them that if they are in a eligible group, that they should go and get the vaccine as soon as possible. So thank you very much, and I'm looking forward to hearing from your experts this evening.
Thank you so much, Vice Mayor Weinroth. We appreciate your service very much. And now it's my pleasure and privilege to introduce the members of our panel this evening. The first on our panel is Dr. Alina Alonso. Dr. Alonso is the director of the Florida Department of Health in Palm Beach County. She's been serving the medically underserved since 1989. She oversees the operation of one of the largest county health departments in our state, with more than 720 employees that provide a full range of primary and preventative services to 7 health centers located throughout the county. They help in epidemiology, disease control, environmental public health, nutrition, emergency preparedness, school health and community health, and the public health and preventive residency, which makes theirs a nationally recognized academic organization in a class all by itself. She graduated from Barry University in 1978 with a major in biology and double minors in chemistry and mathematics, which puts her at direct opposite to me. She attended medical school in Juarez, Mexico, and did her residency in New York in family practice and also in public health. She is a passionate advocate for a healthy community, and we're so grateful for her being with us this evening. We also have with us Dr. Jason Goldman. Dr. Goldman is a board-certified internist and a fellow of the American College of Physicians, and he is licensed here in Florida, California, Nevada, and New York. He completed his training at Jackson Memorial Hospital after graduating the 6-year combined college and medical school program at the University of Miami. He has been very active in the Florida Medical Association, where he has held several different leading roles, and is the governor president of the Florida chapter of the American College of Physicians, and also active with the CDC. We are blessed also to have with us tonight Rachel Garan. Rachel is a registered nurse and the director of epidemiology and infection prevention at Memorial Healthcare System. She holds a master's in public health and a specialized experience in making healthcare safe for all patients, staff, and the community. She works daily to stop the spread of infectious disease, including COVID-19. And in addition to her incredible music videos that teach you hand washing and infection prevention and the importance of the influenza vaccine, she has also worked very, very hard in preventing healthcare-associated infections and outbreak investigations through identifying data-driven patterns and translating new research into clinical best practice. And lastly, we are blessed to have with us Mason Slane, who, among many things in his illustrious career, is a principal investor and board member of Certara. Certara offers, among many things, the ability to create biosimulations of clinical drug trials using advanced applied mathematics and massive clinical databases. They are currently active in over 20 COVID-related drug and vaccine projects, and their biosimulations have played a significant role in advancing the development of these programs in medicines and vaccine. Over 90% of the drugs approved by the FDA during the past 5 years have involved Certara and their biosimulations and their incredible research. They are also active in the development of liquid biopsies and personalized medicine. You can find more information by Googling Certara or going to their website, www.certara.com. Thank you to all of you for giving us time this evening and for being with us and to provide our community with answers. I want us, before we begin, though, to take a look at the bottom of your screen, and you'll see on your Zoom screen a little icon at the bottom that says Q&A. If you have a question for people on our panel, when we get through the prepared questions that we've had for you, which hopefully will answer many of your questions, please put your questions in the Q&A and we will hopefully be able to answer them so that everyone will get all the information that they need. So the first question we really have is this vaccine. How does the COVID-19 vaccine work? And is there a difference between the different vaccines that are out there, the Pfizer vaccine or the Moderna vaccine, and then the vaccines that we've heard of that are either in production, like the ones made by Johnson & Johnson, or the one that is being used in Britain that was developed by AstraZeneca and Oxford University? And are there differences in their efficacy and in how they work? And so, Jason, I'm going to ask you, please, to kick off and explain to us a little bit in ways that we can understand how the science of these vaccines works.
Absolutely. Thank you, Rabbi. I'll try and be brief because I could talk for hours on this topic. One of the things I really want to assure people is that even though the vaccines seem to have been developed very quickly, the science, platform, and technologies for these vaccines have been around for a long time. So let's start with the messenger RNA, which is technology that has been around for decades and finally has been utilized in a vaccine platform. So in brief, going back to our basic science, we have the DNA, which makes up all of our genetic code, and our body takes our DNA, goes through a process inside the cells, and then translates it into proteins, which are then used in the body. So when you deal with a virus, they're basically pieces of genetic code. So when you want an immune response, you want to find that one target that is common to all forms of the virus. In the case of coronavirus, they have a spike protein. This spike protein is what allows the virus to attach to cells in the body and infect them. So when the body has an immune response, it looks for that spike protein, creates our defense mechanism or our antibodies and attacks the virus by recognizing the protein. So what Moderna and Pfizer have done is taken messenger RNA. So normally in your body, your DNA gets translated to messenger RNA, which then goes through your cell processes and makes a protein. Messenger RNA is very unstable, it falls apart. What Moderna and Pfizer have been able to do is make a capsule, if you will, around the strand of messenger RNA that tells the body to make spike protein. So when you get that vaccine, it gets taken into muscle cells. It does not go anywhere near your DNA. It does not mutate you. It does not cause any defects. All it does is take that messenger RNA, go through normal cell processes, make the spike protein, which is then put on the cell of the body. And then the body says, this doesn't belong. We need to attack it, and create your immune response or your antibodies. The spike protein goes away, the messenger RNA is degraded, but what you're left with is a defense mechanism. And this has been proven to be 100% effective against severe disease and about 95% effective in the person getting mild to moderate disease. Then you have the Johnson & Johnson and AstraZeneca platforms, which are what we call adenovirus based. So what they did was take another virus, a common cold virus, in this case, a chimpanzee virus, that is not going to replicate. It's not going to make more of itself if it gets in you. And they take a piece of that out, put the code for the coronavirus into it, and that gets taken into the body and gets translated into a spike protein so the body can have an immune response. And then it gets rid of what's left of the vaccine that was injected. So that adenovirus platform is a vehicle. It's, one of my colleagues says, we've invented the gun, we're just changing the bullet. So we just take that piece of genetic material, put it into a virus that will not make more of itself and allow the protein to be produced. And then you have Novavax, which is coming out with a protein-based vaccine, which is essentially taking the spike protein itself, attaching it to something else, a matrix or an adjuvant, a capsule, if you will, and injecting that so the body will see the proteins and say, this doesn't belong, and create your antibody response. Bottom line, the goal for all the vaccines is to introduce the spike protein itself so that the body sees it as something it doesn't belong, creates an antibody response. So when you do encounter COVID virus in the wild or in the environment, your body recognizes the spike protein, destroys the virus, and keeps you healthy. And that's, in brief, how the different vaccines so far work.
So if I show up and they say, oh, today we're not giving Pfizer vaccine, we're giving Moderna vaccine, should I try to come back another day and get the Pfizer vaccine because one's better than the other?
Essentially, Pfizer and Moderna are about the same in efficacy and how they work. They're currently the only two under emergency use authorization and approved. It does not necessarily matter which one you get, as long as you get the same two vaccine series. If you start with Moderna, you get Moderna on the second one. If you start with Pfizer, you get the second Pfizer. They're not interchangeable, but they're both equally effective. And whichever one you can get, you should get.
Thank you. I appreciate that. So, it's amazing, we're just, we're looking, it's February 3rd. As I think back to February 3rd, 2020, I'm trying to remember my life back then. I don't know about you, but I sort of suffer from pre-COVID amnesia. I know I had a life before then, but it's hard to even remember. And I find that when I'm watching television and I see people and they're not wearing a mask, I'm like, hey, wait. Why aren't you at a restaurant? Why aren't you wearing a mask? And then I realize this is a movie. This happened years ago. It's amazing how much this changes in time. But, I think back, February 3rd, 2020 was about when we were just starting to learn about this. And now here we are a year later getting vaccinated. I mean, it's almost miraculous. So I wonder, how is it possible? Dr. Goldman, you mentioned that a lot of this science existed before, but Mason, can you tell us how were they able to accomplish this in what seems like in some ways a long time, but really it's an incredibly short time? Can you talk a little bit about the testing that went into these vaccines, like so that we know, how do we know that they're not only efficacious, that they work, but how do we know that they're safe?
Sure. Thank you, Dr. Goldman, and thank you, Rabbi. The first thing I want to say is that when they're available to you, get a vaccination. Don't hesitate at all. I've run into so many people that are afraid for various reasons, or think that you're just not going to get COVID, so you don't need to do this. That they didn't get a flu vaccine, so why do they need this? It's all not right. It's you. The best thing for you to do is, as soon as you're able to get it, to get vaccinated. Nothing bad's going to happen. If you have a serious allergy problem, you may want to consult with your doctor. But aside from that, you need to go out and get it as soon as you can, because if you don't, the possibility of getting COVID is very serious, and you don't know what the ramifications to your body is going to be. Also, it's important that we all get vaccinated so that we can develop herd immunity in the community, so that we basically kill the vaccine before it keeps mutating and trying to avoid the cures that we've developed for it, which certainly is happening right now with the South African virus and Brazilian virus and whatever, where it's believed the vaccines that are out there now are still largely effective, but the mutations in a Darwinian way will keep happening if we allow the virus to have full reign of people in society, which has been the case. So get vaccinated. That's by far the most important thing I can say. In terms of the actual vaccines, the other reaction you hear widely is that, wow, these things came out of nowhere, that this COVID thing happened last winter, and all of a sudden there's these vaccines, and doesn't it take 10, 20 years for a vaccine, and don't they test it for 4 years and all that stuff? Well, that's all true. But in terms of the mRNA, and in terms of the J&J and some other things, they come out of a long history of development. The mRNA technology has been working for at least 20 years. It's not a new science, and it's been aimed not at just viruses, but also cancer and other things. And it's actually going to be a very important tool in medicine going forward. It really could lead to major advances in cancer and other terrible diseases. So what happened in the mRNA front is that some of the companies that have been working with it for a long time, like Moderna, like Pfizer, actually BioNTech more than Pfizer, and others, really kind of shifted gears to focus on COVID-19. And so they had a really big advantage when they started. They had already done a lot of the basic research, even animal testing, not so much on the spike protein, but on things that are related to that. So they didn't come out of nowhere. In terms of the J&J and other more typical vaccines, unfortunately, COVID-19 is not the first COVID. I mean, the SARS virus of a few years ago, which fortunately didn't become a pandemic, gave a lot of opportunity for the pharmaceutical companies to work on cures for viruses of this nature. And also it had Ebola the same way. So there's history in terms of the technology, and there's history in the applications. Now, how do we convert that into actual commercial products that go into people's arm when we're comfortable that nothing bad is going to happen? Well, that had a lot to do with the design of the trials. The trials really had to be designed well because they had to work. And if they didn't work because of a design flaw, it would have been disastrous for the companies, and certainly disastrous for the world. So they spent a lot of time in design, and that's where, and I don't want to make this a commercial for Certara, but we've worked with over 20 of the active 65 programs in COVID vaccinations and treatments. And what we do is basically use big data that's contributed by consortiums of most of the pharmaceutical companies in the world, and build models around that to simulate the result that you could expect by introducing these proteins into human biologics of a very, very wide variety, from age, ethnic, different types of populations, different types of comorbidities. That all had to be handled in a trial. And so we were very involved in creating the design for the trial and basically where the leverage points were to find out if the viruses would work across a wide population. I should also add that I think we'll find that, particularly in terms of the Pfizer and Moderna vaccines, that they're very overpowered. We're doing the 2 shots a month apart, and because that's the way the trial was done. And again, the trial had to work. So I believe that the amount of antibodies that it created is probably more than enough to do the job. So, but that's an issue to be discussed later, and it'll probably become a very relevant issue, because if we allow the vaccine to continue to mutate, then we may wind up doing this a lot more than once, unfortunately. So, so that's the important thing about it. And again, reinforcing why we all need to get vaccinated. So what you're getting in your arm is a result of decades of research, of application to other viruses and other diseases, a technology that was born decades ago, and the application was very relevant to the specifics involved in human biology, which is obviously broadly different across different segments of populations. So it was a job that was done very thoughtfully by the pharma companies and the companies that worked with, and done to make the highest possibility of success. And fortunately, they've achieved that, with Moderna, with Pfizer, it appears with J&J and Novavax, and apparently with the Sputnik vaccination in Russia, apparently. So, and a couple of Chinese vaccinations. So we're making good progress. And frankly, between the rate we're doing it right now, which is about 1.3 million a day, which hopefully goes to 1.5 million, which means at 1.5 million, or you're doing over 10 million a week, or 40 plus million a month, we could get to a significant proximity of herd immunity in 2 or 3 months. Given the fact that we're not vaccinating children, and there's a lot of people that just are never going to do it. So I hope that's helpful.
Great, thank you. So some of us are watching on Facebook, and we see our friends who are getting vaccinated, and some people are saying, hey, wait, I wasn't feeling good after my vaccine, or I wasn't feeling good after the second dose. So Rachel, if you can tell us a little bit about what are people really experiencing when they get the vaccine, and how do I know it's safe to take the vaccine? And if I'm not feeling well after the vaccine, does that mean there's something wrong with the vaccine?
Sure. Thank you very much. I've seen thousands of people get vaccinated in the past couple of weeks. It's a humbling experience. It's amazing. And we are so fortunate around the country, around the globe. People who have been vaccinating have been looking at the data, and we have not seen any safety issues with either of the Pfizer or the Moderna vaccines. The most common side effects that people are getting are some pain, soreness, redness at the site of injection, and that's the same, very similar to what people get after a flu shot or any other types of vaccines. Another possibility is that it is common to have some cold or flu-like symptoms, and we've seen this especially after the second dose. That usually resolves around 24 hours. You can take a Tylenol or ibuprofen after your vaccine if you need it, but you don't want to take that before the vaccine, prophylactically, or trying to prevent any type of your body's immune system from working. And so that's why we know that it is safe. We have seen a few allergic reactions, but not in a very large number. It's pretty much the same that the clinical trials saw. And every single person who did develop an allergic reaction, they are completely fine afterwards.
Thank you. Rachel, just to follow up on that, let's say I already had COVID and I've recovered. Do I need to get vaccinated?
Yes, it is important for every single person to get vaccinated. There are some prioritization due to limited supply that you can take. So you could wait 90 days to really let people who have not had COVID get the vaccine first. But there is no contraindication to getting the vaccine. So you still want to get the vaccine even if you've had COVID. You do want to make sure you're out of your isolation period, or if you've been exposed, you're out of your quarantine period before you go to a public vaccination site.
Okay, great. Thank you. So Dr. Alonso, from the county and the state and there's this, we live in South Palm Beach County. There are some people of advanced age down here, not many, but a few. And so we've seen that there is, in some ways, a lot of stress that older people are feeling, a lot of pressure that other people are feeling about getting the vaccine. So can you tell us a little bit about what's the plan for distributing the vaccine? Who is eligible to get it now? Sometimes I see that younger people are getting it, but I thought only older people were allowed to get it. Tell us a little bit about how we go about getting the vaccine. Who's eligible? What do I need to do to qualify to get an appointment? And why has this been so difficult? Dr. Alonso, you are muted. That's the Zoom sin of the week. You can unmute yourself there.
There you go.
Great, thank you.
There you go. I was so excited to answer the question. Yeah. So yes, there's even been still a lot of confusion. So every new production of vaccine, there's 3 phases. And in that first phase, we expect limited vaccines. So one of the things that is important is that in that limited vaccine, the right amount, the correct amount of people actually get identified to be vaccinated. So the first thing that happens is the governor issued an executive order. And he said that during the first phase of the vaccine, all providers administering the COVID vaccine shall only vaccinate the following populations: long-term care facilities, residents and the staff, persons 65 years of age and older, and healthcare personnel with direct patient contact. Only the hospitals could vaccinate people with comorbidities or situations that would put them more at risk of the COVID, only in the hospital. So the physicians, it was left up to the discretion of the physician. So when you look at the number of people that have been vaccinated, you see that over 80% of the population in Palm Beach County, for example, are over the age of 65, because that's who we're concentrating on. The other groups of people that were vaccinated were also the nursing homes and the care facilities, including the workers and the patients. And that was done by the providers that were contracted with CVS and Walgreens at the federal level. And those people were going to take care of the nursing homes and the long-term care facilities. The hospitals got the vaccine directly from the feds and the state, and those hospitals had to deliver that to their patients as well as to their hospital critical staff, which included other people besides physicians and nurses. So anyone taking care of those COVID patients were allowed to do that. But they are the only ones to this day that have the discretion to vaccinate people with comorbidities. And that's very important, because some people get confused and they're really wanting us to give them the vaccine, even though we cannot, because the executive order says that we shall only vaccinate those of 65. The fire rescue and the paramedics, as well as the county health department personnel there and the healthcare workers, are also included in the vaccination. And and so is the healthcare district, because we're part of the force that is going to be doing that vaccination. So that's how that was prioritized for those specific groups to actually receive the vaccine.
So if I can follow up with that, Dr. Alonso, when do you anticipate that we will be beyond that initial first phase and that younger people will be able to get vaccinated? Let's say, I'm not a senior, I'm not an essential work category, I'm just an average 51-year-old person, 40-year-old person. When can I expect that I will be eligible to get vaccine?
That's what everybody's asking. And I've tried to explain that using those 3 phases of the vaccine that occur. So usually each phase takes about 2 months. So we started very late in December with phase 1. We're now into the beginning of February, right? So we went through December to January, that's 1 month. We would expect to go through February to the end of February, like into March, to start going into phase 2. But it all depends on how much vaccine is produced and how much of that vaccine then gets out to all our states, so that then goes down into the county level. So that's the way it moves from the feds to the states, and then from the states down into the county level. And so once that vaccine gets to moderate, when we start seeing more vaccine, that's when the governor could add more people to the categories that can get vaccinated, which probably will include people with comorbidities. It may include the law enforcement that still hasn't gotten any vaccine, although the fire rescue got them, but not the law enforcement. And then you have all kinds of other categories, essential workers. And that's a really tough category because everybody feels if they're a worker that they're essential, but there's certain categories that get categorized in those terms. And then finally, in phase 3, which will be late spring to early summer, goes the general population, everybody else that then doesn't. By that time, we should have plenty of vaccine flowing so that there will be no lines and everybody will just be going and getting their vaccine at their doctor's offices, and there'll be plenty to go around and everyone getting it.
Okay, great. Thank you. I appreciate that. Dr. Goldman, did you want to add something to that?
Yeah, I do. As you referenced, my work with the CDC, I'm on the COVID vaccine work group at the CDC and helped devise some of these guidelines that the advisory committee voted on. And just to point out, that I've had this conversation with the Surgeon General as well. The guidelines in the state of Florida drastically differ from the CDC, which prioritized healthcare workers, long-term care facilities, and then moved on to the essential workers, which are well-defined categories by the federal government, because we had to balance risk of death versus risk of transmission, and that someone who could protect themselves through isolation, quarantine, masking, et cetera, is less risk of getting an infection than someone directly on the front lines. So it's really become quite challenging from the federal to the state perspective, as every single locality has their own criteria, where other states are following the CDC guidelines. And for example, we put teachers and the essential workers with fire rescue and others above an age-based categorization, because many over 65 could protect themselves from masking, quarantine, and other means. So the gating criteria was very well established with a very ethical framework to make sure in a limited supply everyone would get vaccinated, balanced as well with making sure minorities, people of color, and those most at risk of infection would be able to be protected while making sure that society can still function. So the state of Florida is drastically different from the CDC guidance, but it's a governor per governor choice.
Yeah.
So thank you. Jason, I'm going to ask you, we're hearing about these different strains. There was this British strain that we heard that was a little bit more contagious, and then we hear there's a Brazilian strain and there's a South African strain. Can you talk a little bit about these different strains and the efficacy of the vaccine to protect us against these different strains?
Absolutely. So it's not unexpected that there will be mutations in viruses. That's what they do. Whenever they infect and replicate, errors occur in their genetic code, and that will sometimes cause the viruses to have antigenic drift, as we call it, where they're a little different from how they started. So what that may do is make them either more contagious or more virulent, more deadly. Viruses want to survive. I've said this before. They have one purpose in life, and that is to infect, make more of themselves, and move on to the next person. That's the only thing they want to do, is keep making more of themselves. So whenever you pressure a system, whenever we create more opportunity for the viruses to mutate, that's what will happen, because they want to continue to survive. So if people are not wearing masks, if people are not social distancing, if people are not getting vaccinated, and you're letting the virus run wild, you're going to end up with more strains, more mutations, and what's going to happen is a stronger virus. So what we're seeing is that this is occurring. We haven't necessarily tested for it extensively here in the United States per se, but that doesn't mean that we don't have those variants. They probably are in the United States in more numbers than we know. We just haven't necessarily tested. So it looks like some of these variants are more contagious, not necessarily more deadly, but that may change over time. The vaccines will hopefully still be effective, or I should say our antibody response to the spike protein should still be effective to keep us healthy. Only time will tell. The companies, manufacturers are looking at that and doing post-vaccination studies. We have a tremendous system at the CDC of looking at the statistics, the analysis, the data to try and track all of this. So the hope is that it will still be effective and the data is still coming in. Until that happens, the main goal is to prevent the spread of the virus. Because before we ever had vaccines for every public health crisis, from Ebola to SARS to MERS to any of these other infections, we didn't have vaccines, but we had good public health measures, which is identify the positives, contact trace, isolate, and prevent the spread. So even before the vaccine, if every single person wore their mask in all appropriate settings, social distance, don't gather for the Super Bowl, don't gather for holidays, don't gather for New Year's, don't gather for Thanksgiving. If everyone had done that, we'd stop the spread, stop the mutation, stop the variants. So now we're here though, but we can still stop this if everyone does the right thing. But of course, we are all concerned that these mutations and these strains are going to escape the antibody response and mutate into something potentially more serious and more deadly. But hopefully our antibody response will continue to be protective, but only time will tell as we look at the studies.
Thank you. I appreciate that. So Rachel, let me ask you a question. So now I've got my vaccine, right? I got my card, right? I've got both my shots. And is that my get out of jail free card? You know, do I get to now do whatever I want? You know, what can I do that I couldn't do before getting vaccinated? Can I travel and go visit my family? Can I go out to eat in a restaurant? Can I sit in a movie theater? Can I have friends over? You know, what is it that I can, what does the vaccine allow me to do?
So unfortunately, Rabbi Dan, the vaccine card is not a sexy get out of jail free card for us. Probably for many, many months, just like Dr. Goldman said, we will have to do those mitigation efforts to curb or contain the spread of coronavirus that we've been doing, the wearing a mask, staying within your family unit, not gathering, not going to crowded places, doing things outdoors as much as possible. All of these things have to continue until a very large portion of our population is vaccinated. So we don't have so much coronavirus spreading in our community. The local Florida Department of Health is doing an amazing job of doing the genetic sequencing with the CDC, with universities, with consortiums. So you can look right now on the CDC website and see that there are variant strains here in our state. We do have, I think as of today, there were 168 identified coronavirus samples that were positive for the United Kingdom variant. So it is here, it is local, and we need to do the mitigation efforts as much as possible, even if you're vaccinated, even if you're going to go out to dinner with your friends that's vaccinated, you still want to stay outside, you still want to stay 6 feet apart, and you want to wear your mask as much as possible.
So, I don't really understand, maybe Rachel, explain this to me. If I'm vaccinated, right, and I can't get sick, then why shouldn't I, have a dinner party, right, with other people? Let's say I'm vaccinated and my partner's vaccinated and I have 2 other friends who are also vaccinated. Why can't the 4 of us get together and have a woohoo, we're vaccinated cocktail party?
So we are still learning about how the vaccines are working with people who develop COVID after they get vaccines. It did happen in the clinical trials. It is still happening now. So we know that the vaccines are really good at preventing you from getting very, very sick, but we're still learning to see if they can stop spreading from one person to another. And then you don't want to be the unlucky person that vaccine doesn't work for, and then you end up getting COVID or you end up spreading it to somebody.
Dr. Alonso, did you want to chime in on that? Now you have to unmute.
You keep hitting the wrong button. What's wrong with me tonight?
There we go.
No, she explained it very well. So the reason I got the vaccine was so that I wouldn't die from the COVID, not that I won't get it. Okay. And that's how I try to explain it to the folks who ask me, should I get it? It's not because you're going to be able to go out and party. And a lot of the elderly especially are saying this. They're saying, I've stayed home now for 10 months. I need to get out. I want to get the vaccine. No. If you have survived this long staying home, you need to keep surviving. And the idea is not to go out now with the vaccine and feel like the sexy, I like the idea of the sexy passport. This is so that you don't die if you get it, that you're not going to be as ill. You're probably not going to have to go into the ICU. You're going to be able to fight it off like the 15-year-olds that think that they're fighting it off. And so it's going to protect you from that, but not necessarily from getting it. So we must wear the mask, wash our hands, and keep our distance, especially so that we can keep these other mutated viruses and the different strains from promulgating and continuing to spread. So that's very, very important.
So what I'm hearing you say, just so that I understand, is that even if I'm vaccinated, it doesn't mean I can't get the virus. It just means that the virus isn't going to get me. Am I right? That I can still, I may get sick, but I'm not going to get as sick. But am I able, even if I'm vaccinated, am I able to spread? Let's say I'm vaccinated, I don't have any symptoms, right? How am I able to spread the virus if I've been vaccinated and it's not making me sick? Mason, do you want to chime in on that?
Yeah. Okay, so the clinical results in Moderna and Pfizer are basically that for every 20 people that got COVID, 19 of them came from the placebo group and 1 came from the vaccinated group. So yes, you can get COVID, but your odds of getting it are 1 in 20 versus not having the vaccination. So yes, you can get COVID. It's probably not very likely, and it's 100. And the both vaccines were 100% effective against serious COVID. So I'm not. No one should go out and party, and for a lot of reasons, and should be careful. But if you haven't been shopping at Publix because you're afraid to go out at all, I think if you're vaccinated, you can go to Publix and go shopping, wear a mask. Don't be on top of people. Bad behavior is still not appropriate in terms of, being around people and grabbing people and stuff like that. But your odds of getting COVID have gone down dramatically with the vaccine.
And I still need to wear a mask if I'm vaccinated, Dr. Goldman?
Absolutely. So 2 or 3 interesting points. They've done previous coronavirus before there was COVID-19 disease. They did some coronavirus studies over decades and inoculated people with coronavirus, which is basically a common cold. And what they saw was that people developed symptoms, but then subsequent reinfection, they didn't get symptoms, but they still had the virus. And this is not necessarily done in COVID-19, but this was done on previous coronaviruses that we've known about for years. So what we suspect and what we believe is that if you get vaccinated and you get exposed to coronavirus, as we've all said, you won't get seriously ill. Your antibodies should be able to prevent serious illness. But there's always the possibility that the virus is there in you and you can spread it to another person. Now, the hope is that the antibody response from the vaccines will lead to neutralization, which will destroy and kill the virus so you can't spread it. But the studies were not necessarily modeled to prove that. They were looking to see, will you get severe illness or will you get mild to moderate illness if you've been vaccinated? So they proved what they set out to prove. Of course, ongoing, we're looking at to see if they can still have spread or if the virus will be neutralized. But until we know for sure that the vaccination and the antibodies will 100% prevent spread or significantly prevent spread, still wear the mask, still socially distance, because you may not get sick, but do you really want to be responsible for killing your friends and family? And that's why I tell patients who refuse vaccines, I said, if you want to not get vaccinated, that may be your choice, but can you live with yourself if someone else died because of your actions? And that's why we need to wear masks. That's why we need to socially distance. That's why we all need to get vaccinated, because of creating that wall of protection, that circle of protection for our friends and family as well as ourselves.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. So there have been some questions that were shared with us. There's some questions about if somebody, Dr. Fauci says that there's certain intervals between when we're supposed to get the first shot and the second shot, but then there are others that say you can get it up to 6 weeks, and some say it has to be 21 days. And so how important is it that I get the second dose exactly on the day that it says, whether it's 21 days with like Dr. Fauci says, or can I just get it within 6 weeks of when I get my first shot? Dr. Alonso, do you want to take that one?
Dr. Alonso, you're
still muted. I'm sorry, Alina.
Okay, I guess
there we go.
I had not been muted that whole time. Okay. I answered that. I typed it out for them. The CDC guidelines gave that window of 6 weeks. And so the healthcare district, for example, took that advice. And so all their appointments are 4 weeks apart. It makes it easier for people to remember where they have to come, and it makes it easier for their appointments. It's important that people go to the same place where they got their first dose, because that's where the vaccine is given, or the supply goes to the person who gave the first dose. All right. So that's the guidelines that are being followed by the healthcare district. I'll let Dr. Jason answer further on that, since you're from Jack.
So what we did on the work group, and if you read the MMWR, which is the Morbidity Mortality Weekly Report that accompanied the guidelines, we clarified that 6 weeks. We do not want people waiting 6 weeks. It is not okay to get a vaccine and say, I'll get it whenever. We want people to get vaccinated within the recommended timeframes by the manufacturer. 21 days for Pfizer, 28 days for Moderna, full stop, get the vaccine. That's what it needs to be. In the clarification on the 6 weeks, it was, if there is absolutely no other choice, you missed the dosage, you couldn't get it, there was a shortage, up to 6 weeks, you don't have to repeat the series, you don't have to start over, but we are in no way recommending that you wait 6 weeks. We're saying if you have to, get it as quickly as you can. We don't want people looking at it and saying, I can wait. It was more of, if you happen to get it 6 weeks later for whatever reason, it's okay, don't panic, you got both doses, but certainly don't use that as, I can wait as long as I want. 21 days for Pfizer, 28 days for Moderna. That's what the studies have shown to have the most immunity, and that's what needs to happen. That's what people need to do, and that's what they need to follow.
Okay, Dr. Alonso, do you want to add one more thing? Go ahead.
So would that recommendation then negate people being able to give it at 4 weeks for the Pfizer?
It doesn't negate it. It's not ideal, but again, we're in a pandemic crisis situation and we have to make the best of what's available to us. Is it the end of the world if you get it at 4 weeks? No, we do want you to get that second dose. We just can't guarantee the same efficacy because we don't have the data to show that it is done at 28 days when it's 21. We don't want people waiting 4 weeks. We don't want them to say, well, I can wait the extra 7 days. We really want it to be the 21 days for Pfizer, the 28 for Moderna. So not have it as policy to wait 4 weeks. But if it happens to be extended a little, it is what it is. We're not going to have a guideline that says you did something wrong and start all over. But it was more to give a window, but it should not be done as a set policy. It was
Okay.
So it sounds like, oh, go ahead, Dr. Alonso.
I will discuss that with the healthcare district because certainly, guidelines are guidelines, and they thought that they were being more efficient by doing it that way. But we will have that conversation. That's the good thing about medicine, is that we change and we learn every day, right? And that's why we have these discussions. So thank you for
Great.
enlightening me.
There was one question that was shared from someone on Facebook: which is the safest vaccine to get? And Rachel, you said the first vaccine available is the one that you get. So it's like if you're at the rental car counter and they offer you a Ford or they offer you a Chevy, get in the car and drive away, right? Excellent. Okay,
I would
great.
also point out, Rabbi, with that, there are only 2 vaccines currently approved, Pfizer and Moderna, so there's no other choices yet.
Okay, good. So one of the questions was, how does a homebound individual get vaccinated? If I'm an older person and I'm not getting out because I can't get out, not because I just choose or I'm afraid, but I don't drive or I can't get out, I'm homebound. Is there a vehicle where someone can come to the house and administer the vaccine? Or does that person just need to wait? Dr. Alonso?
We're at this point, we're not ready to do it. Although the governor's initiative right now is addressing an initiative here in Palm Beach County, as well as in Broward and Dade. He's got a small task with fire rescue that is doing homebound and Holocaust victims. But the number is very small. So I don't know who those people are and from where they got that list. We had a list of homebound folks for testing, and our plan is to be able to utilize the fire rescue units that can go out from that list that we have. We also have the list for our special needs shelters for people that we know that are homebound and that need services. So we were planning to use that. However, with the lack of vaccine that we have right now, that's not the main priority. So we're really trying to hit those 65 and older folks and healthcare workers that we still have to vaccinate.
Okay, thank you. So there was a question that was posed about a specific syndrome and whether the hospital can allow people with those significant illnesses to be vaccinated. Rachel, you had mentioned something in the response to this individual about the hospitals getting small about vaccine and they don't always know when they're getting more. Can you talk? So let's say I have cancer or I have diabetes or I have, in this particular case, a Stevens-Johnson syndrome or some other significant ailment where my immune system is compromised. And is there a way for me to sort of get in a little earlier because I have these issues? Rachel, do you want to take that one?
Yep. So we did, as somebody who works with the hospitals, I am seeing that our vaccine is coming in very small amounts, and we don't know when we're going to get it until like 2 days before it's coming. At that point, we do have to then work with our information technology and that's to get it up for the appointments and as well as on our website and other places to advertise it to our patients and those people who are in the high risk community. So these hospitals are starting to vaccinate people under 65 who are in high risk conditions, high risk. And so the specific ailments people have, cancer, other types of things, they were not necessarily represented in all of the clinical trials. So there might not be data on safety for one specific health problem that somebody has. So that's why it is important to talk with your doctor about the risks and benefits. But the only contraindication, the only people who should not get the vaccine are people who have an allergic reaction to one of those very specific ingredients in the vaccine. So by and large, people with all different kinds of conditions are getting vaccinated at our hospitals. And then we do have people monitored for 15 minutes, or people with histories of allergies to injectable medications. They are monitored for 30 minutes there at the site of vaccination.
Great. Thank you so much. Can you tell us a little bit more about what's going to happen when these other vaccines come available, whether it's the Johnson & Johnson vaccine, the Novavax vaccine, or whether we'll be bringing the AstraZeneca vaccine to America? How do you think, or how will it impact things here when other vaccines become available? And related to that, should somebody choose one kind of vaccine over another vaccine? Obviously, as you've explained so well tonight, the vaccines that are available currently are the mRNA vaccines, but the adenovirus vaccines sort of have yet to be approved in America. But once they're approved, is there a reason why someone should angle towards one vaccine or another based on either comorbidities or illnesses or autoimmune, or, tell us a little bit about what that might mean. Whoever wants to grab that.
Sure.
Dr. Goldman, go ahead.
Thank you. Well, the way the vaccine approval process in brief works, when a manufacturer wants to develop it, it then goes to the FDA for the VRBPAC, their vaccine-related biological committee. Then the FDA can approve it for emergency use. And then it comes to the CDC, where we look at the data and then make a recommendation to the committee, who then sets the standard guidelines for how it's done. In looking at the data for the different vaccines, there's no real head-to-head trial where they said, here's an mRNA, here's an adenovirus, which works better. So we're looking at the efficacy of each. As J&J, AstraZeneca, Novavax, as they apply for emergency use as the FDA, and if they get emergency use authorization, then the CDC will be able to look at the data and either approve it, recommend it, or not. In the middle of a global pandemic, our goal is to create a herd immunity effect, if you will, and be able to stop the spread. So there will be some benefits to some of the other vaccines when and if they are approved, especially since they do not necessarily require a 2-dose regimen. It may be a 1-dose regimen, depending on which type of vaccine. The storage requirements will be different, frozen versus refrigerated. And if it's a single-dose refrigerated vaccine, like the influenza or pneumonia or some of the others, then they'll be able to hopefully involve the physician offices and be able to get it out to more vaccinators so that we can get more shots in arms. There's some talk about the efficacy of the 95 to 100% with the mRNA versus 60, 70% with the J&J vaccines. Again, that data has to be fully vetted and reviewed. But even if a vaccine is only 60, 70% effective, that's not necessarily a bad thing if you get 60, 70, 80% of the population vaccinated. Because again, you're creating that fire break, that wall of protection. You're preventing the virus from jumping from person to person to person if you have enough of a block between people. And so if you look at past influenza vaccines that have been 60, 70% effective, if you get enough of the population vaccinated, you'll stop the spread of infection. So again, right now there are only 2 available. As more come online, the hope is it's going to allow for more sites, more facilities, more providers, physicians, offices, et cetera, to be able to give those vaccines, get more shots in arms, and therefore create that fire break, if you will, and prevent the spread and go to herd immunity and stop the pandemic.
So I read an article recently that said if I get a side effect, if I, get my vaccine and, maybe I have a day where I get some chills or I have, a few hours of symptoms of that headache or whatever it might be, good. I should feel good about that because it means it's working. But let's say I get the vaccine and nothing happens. I feel fine the whole way through. And then I get my second shot and I still feel fine, maybe a little sore in my arm where the needle went in, but otherwise I'm feeling good. How do I know it's working?
The data.
Rachel, you want to jump in on that?
Okay.
You're good.
So I did answer that question on the chat box. Somebody asked about antibody tests. So the antibody tests are not reliable enough to take the vaccine, get an antibody test, and make sure that that's how you have the antibodies. We're seeing some people with actual COVID still don't develop antibodies that are showing up on the antibody tests themselves. So that's not how we would know if the vaccine worked. Dr. Goldman, did you want to answer that too?
Yeah, also, the data and studies show that there is an effective immune response with these vaccines. And if you ever feel so inclined and want to read the medical journals, it's incredibly dense material, but it really does show when they look at the plasma, the serum, and they look at the antibodies and using tests much more available than necessary commercial, it really shows tremendous levels of antibody response, especially compared to convalescent plasma. In other words, people who have been infected, and we check natural immunity compared to the vaccine generated. So not everyone will have side effects, soreness, fatigue, fevers, etc. It doesn't mean it didn't work. The studies and data show it does work. 60, 70% may get headaches, but there's still 30, 40% that don't, but they still have antibodies. So get the vaccine. The data shows it works. It is protective. And if you didn't get symptoms, congratulations. You didn't get symptoms, but you still got vaccinated.
So in our congregation, you have a lot of people who have told me they haven't seen their grandchildren in a year, and they're not traveling. And it's, I think there are in some ways 2 pandemics that we're fighting. One is this terrible disease, and the other is loneliness and despair and a sense of disconnect. What advice would you give to somebody who's trying to balance their own health, trying to be a responsible citizen, and the heartbreak they feel from that sense of separation that they have from their loved ones who may live either in this community or live out of state, and they're so anxious to be able to be together again with family? Mason, do you want to jump in on that? And then others who want to maybe give us a sense, what should we be telling those people?
I think it's a balancing act. I think you can't stay on your own forever. And if you've been vaccinated and you want to see your grandchildren or whatever, I think if you keep your safety measures, if you wear a mask, if you're careful on how you travel, if you're not on top of people, you still social distance, then the danger to you as a vaccinated person is significantly mitigated. And if you are wearing a mask and staying 6 feet apart and not in a crowded room indoors, then your chance of communicating COVID to your loved ones is also very low. So from my point of view, and this is not a medical opinion, I'm not a doctor, but I would say in terms of life that you should, with those safeguards, get out of your house and see your grandchildren.
Dr. Alonso?
Yes, I have two sons, 25 and 23, and one's in Tallahassee, one's down in Miami now, and they're very concerned in terms of bringing COVID home to me. So my 23-year-old son, I told him I wanted him home for the holidays. So he quarantined. He was tested before he came, and we wore our masks. And we had very nice, actually one of the nicest holidays that we have ever had. And they both did that. And I was very happy to see them, and they were very happy to see me. So there are ways to do it. And you're absolutely right. It's all about the amount of risk that one is willing to take. And I say I drive on 95 every day, so I'm a pretty risky person. I was always a nerd in school, and I continue to be a nerd. However, I do some things, and I do scuba dive also. So we all take some kinds of risks in our lives. And I think it's very important to remember the definition of health is the balance between the emotional, physical, and the mental balance in our whole being. And so we have to not isolate ourselves to the point where we start feeling bad. That isolation can actually make us sick. So let's balance it and use a little bit of common sense, especially if you're going to be able to get vaccinated now and have your loved ones get tested before they come to see you. Probably would be a better idea than you perhaps if you've been. It's very scary for people even to come into the vaccination rooms right now. One man told me that he had not been out of his home literally in 10 months and that he was freaking out being in this room, even though we were, we had everybody way more than 6 feet apart. The chairs are all more than 6 feet apart. And he was scared. And so, talking with him and alleviating that fear was very important. But that's how bad some of this has gotten. So I think we have to balance and keep our minds on that.
I appreciate that. Well, we're even a little over time. I'm so grateful for all four of you, for all of the wisdom and the time that you've given. The one thing that I am hearing very strongly from all of you is that when you have the ability to get vaccinated and get vaccinated with whatever vaccine they are able to provide you. And that we're able to hopefully get to that place where, as you discussed, we'll have enough people vaccinated that it will mitigate the mutations and that we'll be able, as soon as possible, to move beyond this pandemic and to return to the fullness of life. I think we tried to answer everybody's questions in the Q&A. I'm going to invite our panelists just to stay on for a few minutes, just in case there are a few more questions that were not answered. I think they typed answers to everybody in the Q&A, but just really grateful to all of you, and to all of you who are watching Temple Bethel. You can find more of our programming by going to our website, www.tbeboca.org. You can click on Virtual Bethel and see all of the offerings that we have, socially distant and online, so you can enjoy as much Temple community as we can offer you from home. And we just wish everybody to remain healthy and safe. Have a good evening, everyone. Thanks so much.